Our son Alan has been producing and directing and writing films lately, and on this segment, or on this tape, we were talking about a lot of our possessions that we've had for years, like my grandma's clock and a china cabinet and dishes and ice boxes and my old pistol and things of that nature. And I don't think any film of me would be complete without talking about cars. I've always been infatuated with cars. When we lived in Annapolis, in Happy Holler, that's where we lived when I started the school, and even back then, when I was 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, I liked cars. And I remember a guy by the name of Bart Eaton had a 35 Ford Coupe. It was green with black fenders, and he lived on up Happy Hollow above us, and he would drive down past our house in that car. And even at that time, I really did, that was a fine looking car. And another one back in that era was one of my uncles. Actually, his wife was my dad's cousin, but they were more like an aunt and uncle, Perry and Maud Sutton. And Perry had a 39 Chevrolet. It was a light blue, and I thought that was the best looking car I'd ever seen in my life. And he sold it to the town hot rod, and he also lived in Happy Holler, and he would come down through there with that car, and he just literally tore that car all to pieces by hot rod. That was such a waste, even at that time. But anyway, my first recollection of automobiles, I guess, was when my dad was driving, hauling mail in a 29 Model A coupe, and he delivered rural mail out of Annapolis, and I had to be somewhere around 6, 7, 8 years old, somewhere along in there, and I would go with him on the mail route just to be able to sit in his lap to drive that Model A. So even at that time, I liked automobiles. And later on, my dad, when he had that Model A, when he carried the rural mail, when he didn't have the mail route anymore, he sold the Model A to the new mailman. So my dad didn't have a car from that time up until 1949, when we moved to the tower. And they built a new house out at the tower. We moved out there in 1949, and my uncle Olin Ruble lived down near Des Arc, and he had what we call a junkyard, a salvage yard, and he resurrected a 1940 Chevrolet out of the junkyard, and he said it wasn't damaged very much anyway. And he painted it, put new upholstery in it, new running boards, and it was just like a brand new car. It was a 2-door sedan. And so we moved out to the tower in 49, and I was going into high school, and I drove it a lot before I was 16. But after I was 16, well, then I drove it almost exclusively. And looking back, I kind of monopolized that car. He still didn't have a car when I was a junior and senior in high school. He still didn't have a car because I drove it all the time. But anyway, that was actually my first car. It didn't belong to me, but it was actually my car. And I drove that all through high school. And so I joined the Air Force in 1953, and after I'd been in a couple of years, I needed a car. So I was home on leave, and I was looking at cars and couldn't find anything. And my dad was talking to one of the local merchants, who was also kinfolk, but he had a car and a truck and a pickup, and he had a 1953 Chevrolet. It was a 210 four-door, green with a white top, and it had 7,000 miles on it. And so my dad bought that car for me. I mean, I made payments to, it was Lois McLean, this guy that had the car. And so I bought that car, and I made out allotment and made payments on that. And so the last 2 years I was in the service, I had this 53 Chevrolet, drove it back and forth to Texas. And that's about the time I started dating Irene. And so I'd get a 3-day pass, and there was 4 of us, and we'd leave San Antonio, and we'd drop one guy off in, 2 guys off in Arkansas, and I'd drop off in Missouri, and another guy would go to Illinois. And then about 24 hours later, we'd do the opposite, go back to Texas, stay in the Air Force. But anyway, that was my first car of my own. And then when I got out of the service, Air Force, I I spent my last year in Iceland, and I had a 30-day leave. And when I came home on leave, we stayed down Des Arc with Irene's mom and dad, and I bought a 31 Chevy Coupe, and it was a good old car. As far as running, it would run. And so Irene's brother Butch and I played with that 31 Chevy while I was home on a 30-day leave. And then my grandmother lived in Annapolis, so when I went to Iceland, I put it in her garage. And then when I got out of the service, and I ended up in Sullivan, I got that 31, brought it to Sullivan, and I played with it up here for a while. And then back then the kids were small, and I wasn't making much money, so I sold it. And then I didn't have a old car for a while. But over the years, I've had, I don't know how many play cars. I haven't had too many new cars or #1 cars, but I've had a ton of play cars. And I've had Fords and Chevrolets, and not too many Mopars, because I'm not a Mopar person. But when Alan and Bev were in college, high school and college, they always had a car, and I'd buy a car and I'd run it a little bit and give it to them, and they would run it. But I've had Monte Carlos, and I've had Lincolns, I've had Chevrolets, and I've had some really nice cars. And so when I retired getting ready to retire, I decided I wanted to restore a 1940 Chevrolet like I had when I was in high school. And so I started looking for a 40 Chevrolet, and I found a 1941 Special Deluxe 5-passenger coupe. And it was in halfway decent shape, but it needed total restoration. So I bought that in about 50, started in 50, no, 90, I retired in 96, didn't I? Yeah, 96, so I bought it about 1994. And I got a separate garage out in the back, so I put it out there. And I knew I was going to restore it, so I knew what I needed. And so I started stockpiling parts. And the 41 is almost the same car as the 1940. So I started stockpiling parts, and the winter of '99, a local friend, Les Schatz, and I restored it, and it turned out real good. And Alan's going to be showing some pictures of some of my old cars and things, and you see some pictures of it before and after I restored it. And I've still got it, and I've got lots of trophies, and it is really a good car. I spent a ton of money on it, but it's my expensive toy. And for years, we lived next to the golf course here in Sullivan, and for years, Irene had a golf cart, and she'd jump on her golf cart and go down and play golf. She was a good golfer, and she played a lot of golf, and I told people I played my old car and she played golf, and we got along just fine. So I don't know what's going to happen now with my 41, because none of my kids, grandkids, and of course I can't ask the great-grandkids yet, but I don't think they'll be interested either, because the old cars are not as popular. The young people, I go to car shows, the young people, they like the 70s and 80s muscle cars, things of that nature, but I still like the old cars. And Alan will be showing some of the pictures of the cars I've had, and I still like the old cars. And I guess when I kick out, I guess they'll put that up for auction or give it to somebody. So anyway, thank Alan for doing this antique show. He's getting to be quite the Cecil B. DeMille. That is an old-time movie producer that a lot of the young people wouldn't recognize, but anybody with any age will recognize that. So thanks a lot, Alan.
Well, it was back in Blind River. when I last saw you live. But we missed that ship on the long decline. Long may you run. Long may you run. Long may you run. Although these changes have come, with your chrome heart shining in the sun. Long may you run. Maybe the Beach Boys have got you now, with those waves